Welcome to the Story Lab. Today we'll look at the Disney Plus Star Wars series The Book of Boba Fett. And we will turn the Book of Boba Fett into the Book of Boba Fett. So, we don't do anything? No, we do. We'll restructure and recut the Book of Boba Fett series into a variant of itself that still tells the same story, only in a different order and with slightly different themes. What's the idea exactly? The Boba Fett TV show The Book of Boba Fett has hardly any scene that doesn't work or is completely unnecessary in the grander story. However, audiences have pointed out several problems with the order in which the story is told, making decisions seem stupid or not explained at all. Some have gone as far as to say the character of Boba Fett was not cool enough or hardly present at all. Could we recut or restructure the show as it is, meaning without adding or completely rewriting it, but still making it better by addressing these problems? Let's see. We start with a bit of character analysis of our main man Boba Fett. Boba Fett is known to us as a badass from previous productions. His show should reflect that, while peering behind the facade and showing us his inner struggles. The flashbacks that Boba Fett experiences while he is recovering in the Bacta tank serve as the perfect manner in which to accomplish this peering behind the armor. Boba Fett is a very tragic character. This should be the story of how he finally found a place for himself in the world, and we need to see that happening in the show, even if it is during the flashbacks. Boba Fett's story plays out in the here and now. We must never lose track of that. In that spirit, the flashback should always feel like a reaction to what is happening in the present day. Okay, so what are our ingredients? Well, for one, the entire show The Book of Boba Fett, because that is what we are restructuring. To that we will add to further elements. The story should include a turning point for Boba Fett. As far as possible, the entire show shall be used. Individual scenes may be trimmed a bit. In fact, let's make that a rule. The entire show has to be used, and what happens, in a canonical sense, may not be changed. The only thing that may change is how Boba or the other characters feel about that event. In general, the idea is not to use material from other productions. If this is necessary at some point, it should be only during the flashbacks, and only material from other canon shows or movies are permitted. So, to be absolutely clear, there will be no new scenes added in our recut. Essentially, this should be something that anyone with a video editor program should be able to do at home. Okay, let's see what our lab comes up with. Here we go. The Book of Boba Fett Recut Episode 1. We start with the same image as the show does in the original, Boba Fett freeing himself from the Sarlacc pit only for his armor to be stolen by Jawas. Then we time jump to the future, where Boba Fett is lying alone in his Bacta tank, dreaming of the past. The past we go to is, however, not his time with the Tusken Raiders, but rather the contents of what used to be Episode 4 of the series. Boba Fett rescues Fennec Shand and enlists her help to get his old ship out of Jabba the Hutt's palace. They manage to do so and escape in the ship together. While flying off, Boba Fett asks Fennec where he should drop her off, and Fennec answers that she would stay for a while. It is at this point that Fennec's face appears above the Bacta tank in the current time, and she wakes Fett up. Now we see the present-day occurrences of Episode 1 of the original series. Boba Fett goes around town, getting to know everyone, but gets jumped by assassins. Fennec drives them off and captures one assassin alive. Meanwhile, Boba Fett is placed back into his tank by his guards and slips back into his dream from earlier. We leave out the scene where Fett takes revenge on the Spiderbite gang, but show how he tried to find his armor in the Sarlacc pit and how he and Fennec discuss their plans for the future at the campfire. It is here that Boba wakes up once more, ready to face his chosen future. Then we go to Episode 2, which goes like this. This episode plays out for the most part in the present day and combines the occurrences from the original second and third episodes. The captured assassin reveals that he had been hired by the town's mayor. Boba Fett pays the mayor a visit but is sidetracked by another powerful foe showing up, the Hutt twins, who wish to inherit Jabba's dominion. Boba Fett is not intimidated and instead recruits a group of young people from the streets of Mos Espa. They prove their worth when the bounty hunter Chrysanthemum attacks in the night, and the former street gang along with Fennec save Boba. During the brief dream phase before Chrysanthemum's attack, we see that Boba Fett still gets lost in his past, back in the time when he tried to be a leader before as a young boy. At this point, a few flashes of Star Wars: The Clone Wars episodes may be included, showing us Boba Fett trying to find his way among the bounty hunters and giving us a few glimpses of his greatest mentor and rival, Cad Bane. After Chrysanthemum is captured, the twins show up to apologize to Boba and gift him a ransom, before announcing that they would leave the planet. Boba investigates the Hutt's change of mind and finds that the Pike Syndicate is trying to take a foothold on Tatooine. As soon as he hears this message, Boba realizes that they are now at war with the Pikes, and he flashes back, without the bacta tank, to a time when he had encountered the Pikes before. Episode 3 then plays out mostly in the past, giving us context about why the Pikes are such dangerous foes. Having ended the previous episode with an image of Boba Fett getting captured by Tuskens, this episode starts by immediately revealing to us how Boba earned the respect of these people. Most of the Tusken-related plot of the original's first episode is trimmed together in this version, having Boba Fett immediately being taken out to dig, discovering the monster and fighting the monster, saving the little Tusken boy. From then on, Boba Fett is a member of the Tusken family. This is when the Pike's train appears, and Boba Fett decides to teach the Tuskens how to fight them off. Boba steals speeders from a local gang and teaches the Tuskens how to ride them. Then, they attack the trains and take it over. During a brief intermezzo into the present day, we see Boba Fett getting to know his new rancer and recruiting Chrysanthemum into his team. We also see more flashes of Boba Fett thinking about his past, and how he never was a real leader before. We return to the Tusken and their raid on the Pike's train, to witness Boba Fett being fully integrated into the Tusken clan by getting his wooden stick. However, in the flashes we see Boba live through, we not only see the past, but also things from the current day, realizing that he is going through this key moment in his life once more today. And when he finally breaks of his branch, we see a version of Boba Fett's duel with Cad Bane, when neither of them won. This is of course an unfinished Clone Wars scene, but is canon and could be used in such a recut. Boba Fett conquers these visions and wakes up a healed man in the present, fondly remembering the time with his Tusken family, who had brought him on this new path in life. Let's move on to episode 4 of this restructured series. Despite having had a changing impact on Boba Fett of the present, this episode does start in the past again, showing us how Boba Fett tried to make a deal with the Pikes only to find his Tusken clan wiped out upon his return. Fett sees the evidence that points to the speeder bike gang he had stolen the bikes from, but knows there is nothing he can do about it. On this sad note, we return to the present, where Boba Fett, now a calm and controlled man, no longer fearing his past, makes a truce with the leading families of Mos Espa, so that they would not turn against him, when Boba inevitably went to war with the Pike Syndicate. The families agree, but Fennec voices concern that Boba Fett does not have enough muscle in his company yet. They imply that they knew someone they could ask to help, the Mandalorian. The rest of the episode follows the story of the Mandalorian, as he tries to master the Darksaber and learns of his new duty to bathe in the waters beneath Mandalore to regain his standing in the cult. We follow Mando to Tatooine, where Pelimoto convinces him to help her build him a new ship. This is where our episode 4 ends. This is of course in the middle of the original's episode, but it hopefully feels more like part of the Book of Boba Fett show this way, rather than an episode from the Mandalorian series that was inserted into Boba's series. And that leaves us with material for 2 more episodes. Episode 5 begins with the scene in Mos Pelgo, where Cobb Vanth drives away a few Pikes, before returning to Mando building and testing his new ship. Fennec Shand arrives at Pelimoto's hangar and asks Mando to join their fight against the Pikes. Mando agrees, but needs to visit Grogu first, which he does. From here on out, everything plays out just like in the original episodes. Mando does not get a chance to speak to Grogu, but Luke Skywalker offers Grogu a chance to return to Mando if he wishes to. Meanwhile, the situation on Tatooine comes to a boiling point when the local tavern is bombed and Cad Bane appears and shoots Cobb Vanth. Episode 6 is then simply the original's Episode 7, shortening the series by 1 episode. In Episode 6 the Battle of Tatooine happens and the Pikes are overthrown. Boba Fett proves that he has left his past behind him by winning the duel with Cad Bane using his Tusken staff, the symbol of his inner change. At the end, Boba Fett has achieved his goal of becoming a ruler, and Mando and Grogu are reunited for their coming adventures. A thing that would make sense to add into this episode, not a scene but only a line, would be an explanation as to why Boba Fett chose to defend the city on a rancer rather than a ship. The city has an ancient ionic shield designed to protect it from planetary bombardment, which would also be why the spaceport is above the city, rather than hangars inside the city like in Mos Eisley. Okay, that came out pretty well. Let's summarize. The series shortens from 7 to 6 episodes. Episode 1, Boba Fett gets back his ship, wins a new companion, and in the present day encounters his first problems as daimyo. Episode 2, Boba Fett handles the situations on Tatooine while thinking of his past. He is shocked to find out that the Pikes are trying to take over his city. Episode 3, Boba Fett remembers his previous encounters with the Pikes during his time with the Tuskens and leaves his past behind him. Episode 4, Boba Fett prepares for war, while the Mandalorian returns to Tatooine on a new life's mission. Episode 5, the Mandalorian visits Grogu before returning to Tatooine to help Boba Fett. The war against the Pikes begins and Cad Bane shows up. And Episode 6, the battle for Tatooine happens, but with the help of Mando and his other allies, Boba Fett overcomes both the Pikes and Cad Bane, finally finding peace in his life. That's it. Please note that everything presented here is simply the results of an experiment. No part of this presentation is intended as a correction of an existing story or claims to be the real story. The selection or omission of any parts of the source material is not to be understood as commentary, positive or negative, on the original productions. These are simply thoughts and experiments based on existing material, and none of it could be created without the work of all those involved in creating the original works. As with any scientific result, you may utilize any of the story ideas that resulted from these experiments for your own experiments or production, while citing this experiment as its source. It is now closing time for our lab. Goodbye until next time.